Hello, Awesome Soul here, back with another concept video. This one is for the Bionic Tentacle, which is indeed a movement part, if you couldn't quite get an idea of what this was for. So I know this might seem like a bit of a weird, out-of-the-box type of movement part, but I think it would be pretty fun to play around with, and actually would have a pretty useful application, definitely differentiating it from other parts. Now, as is tradition with these kind of videos, of course I will start off by going over the design that I've drawn up here for it. So starting off at the very top, we have what is basically the mounting point, and it also contains portions of the tentacle. It has a total of 5 mounting points, 1 on each of the side faces, and then 1 single one up top. So this means that it will be able to hold on for quite a bit if you take chassis damage, which is always very important for movement parts. Coming down, we have the actual tentacle itself. While in this form, yes, there are multiple forms, but of course I will get into that a little later. You can see that it is made up of individual segments that are more or less carbon copies of one another that are used to make up the entire bionic tentacle. Obviously, with it being robotic, these portions actually slide out and in rather than, muscles contracting and all that. At the very bottom, we have the foot. This will be what's making contact with the ground when it's moving. As you can see, there are a few spikes at the bottom and a hole in the middle where another larger spike comes out of. But, like I said before, there are a few secrets that this thing holds, and I will go into that later on in the video. So without further ado, let's finally delve into the actual features of this movement part. The very basic things you need to know about this is that it has a moderate movement speed, so faster than the insect and mech leg, but slower than the sprinter leg. Ideally, this would be in the mid to low CPU range, somewhere around 70 to 80 CPU per tentacle, and they do have fairly decent armoring for their CPU size. This slightly higher armor is to compensate for the fact that this part will spend the majority of the time in contact with the ground. This obviously leaves it rather susceptible to plasma barrages, whereas sprinters and mechs can simply jump into the air, and insectoids can crawl away or just simply take to the skies with their light weight. These things don't exactly have that luxury. While they have a decent jump, it's certainly nothing special. It's mainly there for it to get over really short obstacles. But don't get me wrong, it certainly has a lot of other perks definitely going for it. When the leg is contracted, it's fairly short as far as walking parts go. It's about the same height as an insect leg, actually, from top to tip. That being the actual claw portion of the insect leg. This means that you will have a lower height than any mech or sprinter bot out there, meaning that you have the option to keep a rather low profile, which is usually a pretty good thing. Now, of course, I have touched on the contracted mode. This means that there is another mode, yes, and that is anchored mode. When equipping the Bionic Tentacle to your bot, it will take up a slot on your hotbar, similar to how weapons or modules do. This means that when players are in battle, they can simply hit the button and switch between contracted mode and anchored mode. This might sound similar to some who've been keeping up with the concept videos over the years, as it does sound somewhat similar to the way the Guardian leg has the lockdown mode. While it may share similarities in the fact that you do need to quote-unquote lock down this leg, that's where the similarities end, really. Whereas the Guardian leg had a rather long cooldown for unlocking and locking, the switching between anchor mode and contracted mode is completely instant. There is very little to no delay. When in anchored mode, the tentacle will release a spike from the bottom of the foot. This will anchor, as the name suggests, the tentacle in place. Once this happens, the player is then able to move the main chassis of the bot around in much a similar fashion of a helicopter or a drone. The tentacle is actually capable of extending fairly far as well. Now we start to narrow in on what exactly the main focus and the main perk of using this part. As said previously, when anchored and you're actually moving around the chassis of your bot, you are able to move around at incredibly high speed and also have very precise maneuvering. This is mainly used to duck in and out of cover. We do have some parts that are able to utilize cover decently well, but nothing to this extent. I'll just give you some examples here. For starters, hovers can slide in and out of cover, but they do have the very slow acceleration they have. They usually tend to keep going in one direction. So if you want to slide out, get a few shots off, chances are you will duck out further than you intend to, and then you have to wait a few seconds before your hovers kick in and actually drift you back towards cover. Mech legs and sprinter legs are also able to jump up and over cover, peeking out from above. While effective, it does have a few downsides. The first being, obviously, you can only shoot at really the peak of your jump, and eventually you will go down and be unable to shoot until you can jump up yet again, meaning that you won't be able to constantly fire. Whereas with the Bionic Tentacle, you can raise yourself up and stay in position, and wave from side to side in order to dodge attacks, rather than simply ducking back down. But of course, with the Tentacle, you are also able to duck back down as an option if you so choose. So close your eyes and picture it with me. There is a large wall in front of you, with many enemies on the other side. There's still a decent amount of room between you and the enemy, but this wall will definitely give you some support over just going out in the middle of nowhere and trying to fire at them. So you move up to the wall, you anchor yourself down, and you extend your tentacles all the way up so you're peeking over the top of this wall. You're then able to get a few pot shots off before the enemies notice you. Eventually, of course, they will start returning fire. The plasma bots are the first to fire at you, and you're able to dodge their plasma with ease because you can swing from side to side, and you can anticipate where they're going to fire next. Of course, while doing so, you are able to fire back at them. So yeah, it's situations like that where this part will shine, and we don't really have anything else like it. Even helicopters is another example, the rotor blades. While they are decent at doing cover, one, they have even more drift than the hovers that I gave the example of earlier, and two, they are incredibly large, so usually you will need to make a rather large bot. With the Bionic Tentacles, however, you can keep your size relatively compact and utilize cover far better than any other part out there. Earlier on in the video, I did talk about this part having very poor jumping abilities. Well, this feature somewhat makes up for it. Say for example, there is a ledge that you want to get up to. So you can get to the bottom of the ledge, and then you can enter anchored mode, lift yourself all the way up to the top of the ledge, and then exit anchored mode. The feet will then return to the location of your bot's chassis, rather than returning your chassis to the location of the legs' feet. You must take into consideration, though, the longer you extend your tentacle before contracting it, will increase the recovery time you have when coming out of it. What I mean by recovery time is that if you've extended your tentacle very far out, and then you contract it, you will not be able to move for a few seconds. The farther it is, the higher the penalty. Possibly up to 3 seconds if it's incredibly far out, something like that. This is mainly to counteract the fact that I did bring up earlier that the tentacle is able to wave around at very high speeds. This essentially allows you to raise your bot up to the desired location at incredible speed. With this recovery time penalty, it will be very useful still for actually getting up to spots that you couldn't reach normally. It will still be faster to walk normally, rather than trying to abuse the whole anchor mode to increase your speed. Obviously, you can use this to climb up to high ledges, or use it to get around corners and out of sight rather easily. I do specifically bring up the climbing point, though, because this part doesn't actually have the ability to climb. Although it may have spikes on its feet, those are simply there for the anchor mode. The only part that is able to climb still is, of course, the insect leg, and only the insect leg. And there we have it. That is the Bionic Tentacle. I'm very interested to see what you guys think of this. I know this might be, to some, considered a slightly gimmicky part, but I honestly do think that this will be very useful in the game and add a whole new playstyle that we don't really have at the moment. As I said, we do have some cover users, but nothing to this extent. And I would love to see how this playstyle would affect the meta. Of course, as always, type what you have to say down below, possibly post some bot ideas that you have that could utilize the Bionic Tentacle to its fullest extent. What are some fancy hybrids you could think of? The list goes on. Really just put down anything you can come up with. It's the comment section, it's there for pretty much anything really. But yes, if you are new here, I welcome you. I do have a lot more concept videos. I would definitely recommend checking those out. There is a playlist that I have that I will be linking at the end of the video. And if you do enjoy what you see here, possibly leave a like, it will help out a lot. And if you love what I do here, possibly consider hitting that subscribe button. It's right there, just tempting you. But yes, I will go ahead and bring this episode of concept videos to a close. I, of course, have been the Awesome Soul. I thank you so very much for watching, and I will be seeing you next time. Take care.